Hey, Story Makers, Mel here in Storymaker Land, and I am so excited to introduce you to my friend from across the pond, Michael Brown, the Executive Director of The Way. Thank you so much, Michael, for being with us. We're so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Well, Michael is a fantastic visionary of how we can tell God's story through all sorts of means, through platforms and digital media. But before we get going, I'm sure that you guys know about the way, so check them out on all their platforms. But Michael, we'd love to hear about your story and how God has moved in your life and brought you here to this place that you are now with the way.
Yeah, so I grew up in a Christian household, but I was a bit of a naughty kid growing up. I
I love it.
my parents are amazing, but my way of exploring my creativity at the time was to rebel against everything they wanted me to do. So I went definitely through a period during my teenage years of working out what life was and what it meant to be fulfilled. And I tried everything under the sun to try and be fulfilled. But then at the age of 16, um, was at a Christian festival in the UK. We love Christian festivals in the UK.
Yes.
During summer, there's about 6 different Christian festivals you can go to. It's great where you can camp and with your youth group. So I was at a Christian festival, and my brother was there, who was a couple years older than me actually, and he had already given his life to Jesus, and I'd already seen his life change quite a lot
Mm,
through that.
mhm.
And I was sitting down at this Christian festival during the talk, and wasn't really engaging. But then, as the worship started, I saw my brother praying, and I was kind of like, okay, God, if you're real, my brother seems to be engaging in this. Then please, like, show yourself to me. And so
Mm.
during that prayer, I just suddenly felt the Holy Spirit fill me, and I started kind of seeing kind of my life in the last kind of 5 years of all the things that I was doing to try and fulfill myself. And I didn't feel God be like, this is wrong. I just
Yeah,
felt God be like, oh, I have a better life for
this is
you.
better. That's
And
amazing.
at that point, I was just filled with joy and so much peace. And that's when I kind of definitely always believed in God, but that was the moment
Mhm.
where I was like, okay, following Jesus is going to be what the rest of my life looks like. So that's my personal
That's
story. Yeah.
I love
Um,
it so much. We are so fortunate to get to explore these stories with all sorts of friends, new and old. And so oftentimes there's such an important moment that happens in adolescence. That's why I think what your work is so special because it's kind of so many crossroads, right? You're like trying to identify like who am I? Who am I apart from my parents? Like what does the world mean? Where do
yeah.
I find purpose? And so I think, yeah, it's so important, I think, for us to share and remember our own stories and adolescence and how God has brought us through. And so you were a kind of a rebellious spirit. Your imagination was captured by God's big story, hope and joy, peace, all the things. And then how did you end up just, you're a creative person. So how did that sort of fashion itself?
Well, growing up, I was really into music. That was my
Mm.
like first creative outlet. I was in a few bands growing up. We were big into kind
Yeah.
of indie rock. That was our thing. I'm sure there's
What instrument do you play?
so I play guitar and drums. So
Nice.
I wasn't that good at guitar, so I mainly played drums in the bands. But I loved kind of exploring creativity through that, and I ended up doing that in church, which really kind of was an amazing like way of connecting those two things. Um, and After finishing school, I ended up interning at a church in central London, and during that year, the thing that really captured my heart was the youth work that was going on. Obviously,
Mm,
had just come out of doing come out of being a youth myself, so I was seeing all these young people around me, um, maybe a few years younger than me, that were going through very similar stuff that I'd been grappling with as a teenager, and just felt really called to help and see if I can help disciple these young people. And so that kind of pulled me into the world of youth work, and I became a youth pastor. I studied theology at St. Melita's College, which is a theological college
Yes.
in West London, and was a youth pastor and loved doing that. And one of the things that I found being a youth pastor was that the most amazing way of engaging young people that don't know Jesus is through peer-to-peer ministry, meaning like young people sharing their faith with their friends. And we used to put these events on where we'd gather a few, like maybe 80 or 90 young people, and we'd have games and stuff like that. And we felt like, oh, we really wanted to have a young person share their faith, share their story at the end of the evening. But a lot of our young people were not interested in standing
Yeah.
up in front of like
It's
100 of,
yeah, it's a lot of vulnerability.
yeah, like 80, 90 of their friends sharing their faith. And so what we ended up doing was I said to some of the guys in our youth group, I said, how would you feel about filming your testimony? We make
Yeah.
it look really great. We try and make it look super creative, and we can film it midweek. And then on Friday night, when we have all the youth gathered for this event, we could show the film, because it would just be like an amazing way of engaging them. And they were up for that. They were fine being in front of the camera. Maybe not in front of 80 of their friends, but they were fine definitely being in front of the camera. So we did that, and I remember filming 3 testimonies the first time we did it, and we showed it at this event. And it was amazing, because it was just them and all their friends, and they were very confident about inviting their friends, which was amazing. And we showed this film, and the just response afterwards of them being able to be in the same room as their friend, and going up to them afterwards and just asking more questions and being like, I didn't know that happened. Some of them were sharing amazing faith stories of how God had encountered them, how they're following Jesus in their lives, and they hadn't heard those stories before, and we were able to create a space for them to share those stories. And that kind of was the start of kind of me working out like the amazing creative ways we can share our faith. And
Yeah.
I can get, so I'll go straight into the story about the way, because it's a great story. So
Yes, I
I
want to
then
hear.
I had a friend called Mark and another friend called Kaylee who had started a YouTube channel called The Way, and they were basically just sitting on a couch in their living room and talking about what faith looked like for them, and sharing that on YouTube to help other young people kind of explore those themes and subjects. And I was watching this from afar as a youth pastor and thought it was amazing. So I offered to start helping film it, because I thought it'd be really engaging for not just people on YouTube, but for my youth as well. And then when it came down to it, I felt God call me to go into it full time. And at the time, that didn't look very appealing, because there was no money in it.
I
Um,
know. What did your parents say? Sometimes parents are all for, nice, sweet jobs like that. And then like, well, is that practical? Were they
yeah,
supportive, or how was that? How was that vibe?
I think they were definitely supportive. I think they knew that I wanted to stay in kind of ministry, but at the same time they're like, YouTube, like what's that like? Will you ever get paid? And that was kind of scary, but that's kind of what kind of made us what we are now, because we were thinking, okay, like practically, how do we make this work? So we started
Hmm.
reaching out to we'd already started creating a lot of videos that were doing really well on YouTube, and reaching a lot of young people. So we reached out to a bunch of charities that we knew that were also passionate about reaching young people, and we were saying, hey, would you like us to create some youth resources for you? And what that did gave us an opportunity to earn some income, to be able to um, have our own ministry, but then also support other ministries. And a couple of after about a couple of years, Kaylee and Mark started getting really busy. Kaylee became a youth worker. Mark started a company, and they kind of turned to me one day and was like, "Oh, Michael, I don't think we're going to be able to be on camera in the way anymore just because we're too busy." And at that moment, I thought, "Oh, well, that's it. Like the way's over." And I kind of didn't know what to do. But then I felt God say, "No, Michael, I want you to carry this on." And through that, started reaching out to a bunch of Christian TikTokers that were in the UK at the time, and basically wanting to create a community of young Christians that wanted to share their faith online. And that's where we met Jesse and Xenia, who if you go on our Instagram, the way UK, you'll see them. And we've gathered quite a few young people that are really passionate about sharing their faith. And back in 2021, when I made that decision, we had about 7,000 young people following us across kind of all our platforms. Now we've just hit over 1 million followers just across all those platforms there, and it's created an amazing community online of young people that are like really open to share their faith but also have
It's
conversations.
so cool. I mean, and it's so like cross culture. I think what we, especially grown-ups, think about social media and the dangers and all the pitfalls that are associated with it. You like too much YouTube or whatever, but God always seems to make a way and an intersection. Like
Yeah,
whatever exists in the world, God is going to get involved with so that we can have our imaginations reoriented, right? So, um, you're such an amazing executive director and visionary of the possibilities of making God's story available right where kids and teens are. It's like
yeah,
we can imagine and hope that maybe they aren't going to be addicted to their phones or whatever, but at the moment they live there. And also there's creativity that happens there too. I think too, like when you think about like TikTok or IG and Reels and what kids are creating, I mean, they're not really on IG as much as TikTok, but when they're creating and sort of sharing who they are or practicing who they are, I think that that's just an opportunity, right,
mm,
for us to kind of capture them too. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and I think
yeah,
that Jesse,
100%.
your people, the presenters are so good at like really just being authentic and being aware and connected in a very like organic way.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for us is that social media is a dark place most of the time, even if it's just like comedy videos that they're watching or prank videos or whatever. It feels quite light most of the time, but I think the element of endlessly scrolling and being attached to that screen that basically takes them away from like real relationships. Um, it can create quite a dark place, and we're just hoping to be a light in that place. That's our vision, is that we're trying to reach every young person that's online with the good news of Jesus. That's our vision as the way. And but the amazing things about these platforms now is they're all discovery platforms. So TikTok
Hmm.
and Instagram, you scroll through and it's not your friends that come up, people that you follow. It will just be random videos that come up, and it's given us the opportunity to reach young people that would never kind of have a conversation about Jesus or even explore faith. It's given us the opportunity to get our videos in front of those young people and help them kind of start a conversation about what it looks like to follow Jesus and have a relationship with him. That's kind of the most amazing thing. But I think young people at the moment, like social media is an extension to their life. Like I grew up in the 90s, 2000s, so the social media wasn't like such a massive thing. It kind of came in more into my teenage years. And so I always saw it as something like extra and add on that we could do and use as a tool. But I think what we know now is that it's just a part of like their lives. So
Hmm.
telling them to put their phone down, telling them to get off social media is actually quite a kind of a like a it's just it feels wrong to them sometimes because it's like, oh, this is the connection to the world that
Yeah.
they have, whether it's the
Yeah, to each
news or
other.
yeah, and to each other. So it does feel very foreign for them to want to disconnect from that. but but and that's why we feel like we need to be in that space.
Mhm.
But we do also want to encourage young people to get out there and create real friendships, real
Yeah.
relationships. We talk about that a lot on our platforms. Yeah.
That's what I would say is like kudos to you guys because I think there's so many trappings of social media where you can try to sort of like feed into the algorithm or what the clickbait is. But it seems that the way is stayed so true to like the story, authenticity, and just like being really clear about messaging.
Mm.
And because it's so well produced, and I think you guys have so many amazing ways to be like the back door to the heart, then you really tune into what you're scrolling into, and then you realize like, oh, there's more. Um, there's more beyond like what's in front of me. So I think that that's really fantastic what you guys have been able to like really key into, which
Yeah.
is super unique. And also, what's so cool, I would just say about the way is that it doesn't feel like you're telling kids what to do or how to be, but you're really impressing upon them like what is the gospel. There's like, and there's these questions that sort of hook them hopefully into the podcast where they can like dig deeper into like scripture and understanding the Bible, discipleship. It's a really beautiful
Yeah.
world, yeah, that you guys have created. So
Yeah.
amazing.
I think a big thing for us is trying to kind of get the realness of like what culture is saying about these things. Like we often, like the most common thing we do is we go onto the streets of London and interview strangers about what their experience of church, religion, faith is, and capturing that authentic kind of reality of what culture says, but then
Mm.
also trying to create like a narrative within that video of like hope and actually what a relationship with Jesus can offer. So we often, the great thing is like we'll often naturally bump into Christians as we're interviewing as well. And so when we're editing those videos together, we try and create like a very clear narrative of, okay, this is what culture is saying. This is maybe where the UK is currently at in terms of its views on Christianity and faith, but actually there's hope and there's like an amazing good news that we can share. So yeah, that's our focus in those videos specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, they're so cool. Well, and then Michael and his team came to New York City and we produced a couple projects together, which are going to be rolling out this year. We're so excited about. Um, but there's just, I think, this thing about like New Yorkers and probably people in London also where I don't know, there's like a willingness to share whether they are engaged or not in, and they're used to being asked questions randomly on the street as well. So Michael, what has been like the most like encouraging kind of encounter? Have you guys ever seen like a light switch or anyone think like, oh, I want to know more about this, like this thing that I've begun to think about because you asked me these funny questions?
Yeah, well, there was actually an amazing one when we were in New York last September when we were filming on the street when we were having a conversation with this lady. She must have been in her late 20s, and she had just moved to New York but hadn't found a church yet. And she was a Christian. She had faith, but hadn't found a church yet, and was finding it hard actually. And we were just asking our normal questions about um, like what is Jesus relevant to our lives now and things like that. And after the conversation, she was talking about how okay, she's actually this has really prompted her to like go out there and properly have a look for a church community she can get involved in. And those sort of stories is like the most amazing because there is a lot of people up in London and in New York that have grown up with faith, but maybe as they've gotten older with the busyness of life, especially in those sorts of cities, you can just busy yourself into like not finding those
Oblivion.
community. Yeah.
Yeah.
And being able to help those young people, especially find a way to be able to um, connect. In London, we have a lot of like churches that we connect people with, but being able to encourage like a young person in where you are in New York to find a church community is like so encouraging. So, and
Yeah.
we have the yeah, it's an amazing time to be able to hear those stories actually all the time, and it's super exciting to be able
That's
to
so cool.
just be a part of like what Jesus is doing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's amazing. Well, Michael, we have a lot of grown-ups who listen, parents of teens. If if you're thinking about like anxious parents who are concerned about like, oh, is faith dead for this next generation, or is it vibrant? Like, what would you have to say to parents who may be anxious about like the future of Gen Z, Alpha, now Beta?
it's beta now, isn't it? 2025, the start of beta generation.
Beta,
I
yeah.
do feel sorry for them because that feels a bit
I
beta coming
know.
after alpha. I feel
That's what
sorry for
my
them.
teen. If I have an alpha and I have a Gen Z, and so they're like, that is sad.
Yeah, that is sad. I hope that doesn't
It's
push
not
onto their
imputation.
identity.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
could be like humility and kindness and gentleness. Maybe
yes,
that's the Gen.
yeah. I think what we've discovered, especially with young people, is that like they are open. They're definitely open to faith, and they're open more than ever. I think we've gone through a couple different generations, especially in the UK, where there was this kind of atheistic kind of mindset of God's not real, like there's no proof,
Yeah, and
and
you're ridiculous if you think of
yeah,
it.
and I think we've gone past that to a point now where most young people, even like the millennials that were experiencing that, have actually realized actually there there definitely could be a God, and maybe I'm opening to exploring what that is, who that is, and that's the amazing thing. And a lot of these young people are growing up without experience of the church, which I think in some ways is really, really good because I think church can become like such a normalized thing, and
Mm.
a lot when I meet a lot of Christian young people that have grown up in the church, they talk a lot about having to kind of get rid of their parents' faith and find their own faith, and sometimes that can create blocks in their kind of journey of like working out like who they are and what relationship with Jesus they can have.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a strong association between, parents and God, and that
yeah,
makes a
I
lot of
think
sense.
I think that, but then for Christian parents that are trying to bring up their young people in church, I think it's a real opportunity to just let them explore what that looks like, and I think they will, as they grow up, naturally like be interested, especially in their older years. I think the main thing that I find is on the opposite side of it is that young people just maybe they're at a point in life where they just don't care actually, and they just want to like get on with hanging out with their friends, playing like their Xbox, playing their PS5. But there will
But
be those moments and in their life where they realize, are like, what is the point of this? And I
yeah,
think that's where, as the church, we need to come in and be there to offer hope and offer Jesus at that point to them. And I think it's really exciting because um, the church is. I do feel like the church is growing at the moment, especially in the UK. I was in a meeting the other day. One of our funding partners is the Church of England, and I was in a meeting with them the other day, and they said that they had the busiest Christmas across churches for like 20 years, and
amazing.
which means that there's a lot of, and it was a lot of it was young men actually going into church for the first time, and which is exciting for all those young ladies out there that have been struggling with the imbalance in church
Yeah.
duties. Um, but I think it's super exciting to hear that actually there's this pull back towards trying to find meaning in life, and
Hmm.
I think especially with everything that's going on in the world at the moment, there feels like there's so much lack of hope,
Yeah.
and us as the church being able to offer like the real hope of Jesus to them is it's super exciting. I do think that this generation is going to be the most open. I think there was a study that Barna came out with, which
Mm.
was actually called the Open Generation, and it
Yeah.
was super exciting. Like reading those statistics of, I think it was over 70% of young people are open to faith and exploring spirituality. And I think that's the sort of thing that is super exciting to me, is that all we have to do is offer it. And
That's so cool. And I think that's such good advice for parents, because oftentimes we're afraid and we think it's up to us, and our kids' salvation is up to us in our hands. And so when we have that perspective, then we sort of clench down. And then we want to make sure that they're have all the right stuff and they're repeating the right information. So then we feel comfortable about doing our job and stewarding on our kids. But really, we have to trust that God's story is a long story. And just like in your own situation where you were in this rebellious experience as a teenager, our kids may go through that. But here on the other end of it, you're in ministry. And that's probably, not a high predictor when when your kids are in being rebellious or not following exactly how you think they ought to go. But God is like so amazing at reorienting people, coming for them. He came for us, he's going to come for them too. And so for all the grown-ups out there, all the parents out there, rest assured, if God pursued you, he will pursue your kids also. And
100%.
so we're so grateful for your ministry, Michael, because it is so authentic and genuine. And actually, so I have two teenagers. Obviously, you met them,
Yeah.
14-year-old and 16-year-old, and or 17-year-old Sophia. But then Sophia was telling me the other day that she's been tuning into your TikTok account, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, I'm just like, okay, cool. I'm just gonna be relaxed about it.
Yeah.
But it's just like one of those things. You're like, okay, like kids really genuinely are engaging in the content. And so I think it's, for all the grown-ups out there anxious and worried about like where their kids are landing, this is a great place for them to land for sure.
Yeah, and just an encouragement that actually this isn't just happening in the younger generations. It's also happening with we're in the amazing position where now, with kind of the influence that we have, we're able to bring on some, like, maybe you'd say, like, celebrity guests onto the podcast, and it's actually amazing to see how open young people are, that have big influences, that are open to share their faith. And I do
Mm-hmm.
think that actually there's some amazing things happen within culture where the normal kind of celebrity is actually more open to share their faith. We had somebody on our podcast the other day that was from Love Island, and which is absolutely hilarious that we had them on. But he was just sharing about his experience of coming to Jesus, and his realization of that putting his life in the hands of Jesus is such like a better option than putting his hands in the putting his life in the hands of
Love
reality TV
Island.
shows. Yeah, and it was amazing to see his story. And there's so many stories like that out there, and I think actually it's becoming more and more prevalent. These young people that have big influence, and because we're not just the only ones. There's so many young people in the United States that are sharing their faith all the time, and it's becoming more popular over here as well, and which just means that I think the general cultural conversation is changing as well. And
Mm-hmm.
with like young people like Justin Bieber and Selena Gomez and people like that sharing their faith openly, I think it's amazing to see that, like, we're able to actually as a culture um, openly speak about our faith more. And
Yeah.
because in the UK that's not a given.
Mm-hmm.
Is sadly, I know in the US there's definitely much more of a faith base there, but in the UK it's not massively popular. So having those cultural voices are actually really important as well, for us
That's
over here, and I imagine in New York as well, as quite a secular city. So
Yeah, well, and I think too, people are realizing that we want to live integrated lives, and when we're compartmentalized and things are segmented about us, and we sort of like tuck this part of us over here and that part of us over there, that's not really living wholly in a like a
mm,
holistic way. And so I think folks are more open to like, oh, I want to know like the whole person of who you are, and so then there's that ability to have more open
Yeah.
conversations around like faith. I think when people are able to be more real and less, I think it can be on the flip side too, where you have these experiences where people feel very comfortable in their like Christian format language. And they need to have the person in front of them encountering with the same Christian kind of verbiage for them to feel
Yeah.
comfortable in that conversation. Um, but the reality is like we, we all just we want to have a high view of the Holy Spirit and God's capacity to like move through like Love Island,
Yeah.
and places like that, like where where you think, oh, would God turn up there? Yes, God
Yes.
turns up
Yeah.
everywhere actually. And then we get to testify, which is so exciting. Like Storymakers in the Way, like we're testifying to like the wild nature of God and his relentless pursuit of his creation. So it's so cool.
100%.
Well, Michael, before we sort of close up shop, I just wanted to ask you, like, what stories have captured your imagination recently, or as a kid? I love to know, like, what's got a hold of your, what's got you, what captured your imagination?
I think, I mean, it's since I was a kid, right up until this day. Um, the first time I watched Lord of the Rings
Oh, yeah.
was 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 just the most amazing experience, actually, seeing. And it's so funny because you don't, obviously, as a child, you don't analyze like your experience of watching those films. I think the first time, I was quite young when I first watched it. I must have been maybe 7 or 8. I think my parents let me watch it. And the experience of watching this hobbit, which is like the most unlikely person to do this amazing task of destroying this ring, this evil ring, um, and people with so much more power around them, like supporting them. I think was like an amazing story of like hope, actually, and that
Mm.
actually how like actually obvious like I don't want to analyze it too much, but I remember when I was growing up thinking that's how like God, that's how God uses us. Like we don't might not have, we definitely don't have all the abilities in the world and all the amazing capacities to do like amazing things, but actually through Jesus, like we do. And what like Lord of the Rings is actually like an amazing way of exploring kind of what God can do in our stories. And yeah, I think Lord of the Rings is also just very epic, and it
Well,
makes me
all
feel
of
very
those
homely.
worlds, yeah, like all of those
Yeah,
worlds that Tolkien created. Well, and Madeline L'Engle, this amazing children's author too. She talks about parenting, and she talks about if we were actually capable, then then we could take credit. But because of our incapabilities and the way that God uses us, then to God be all the glory. And so, and I think that
exactly.
that's what God does all the time, like flipping the narrative and the script, like where Jesus from Nazareth, like what,
Yeah,
born in Bethlehem, like where is that? All of the Nazareth principle, I think, comes into play over and over, and those are the stories that like really capture us because we're like, what? That's impossible. And then you're
yeah.
sucked into that story. So that's so cool. I love that so much, Michael. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being with us
Oh,
today.
thank you.
Yeah, we're going to be launching some things together, Storymakers. So keep an eye out for that. And The Way came to New York and they did some really great interviews, which will come to
Yes.
play. And I just think this is such an amazing ministry and work that you guys have been called to. And so follow The Way all along and encourage the young people in your life. And I think even for grown-ups, this space is for you too, especially the podcast. Jake and I have been tuning in, and it's been so much fun. So lots of love to you
Thank
guys.
you so
Thanks,
much.
Michael.
Thank you.